The real gladiators. What's up, everybody? Just looking at some Dream Team highlights. That's what I feel like we're building over here with the new Dream Team. Damn, it's crazy that was 1992. That was 30 years ago. And it took 30 years for the Dream Team to be regenerated in Maximus DAO with Maximus Team. That's what I'll be going over today. Thought I'd hop on and go through just kind of where the contract is. It's really in the last stages of development, just the final touches on just making sure everything works. Today what we'll do is we'll go over the team contract. We'll walk through the updated team staking rules, and then we'll answer some questions. Just make sure everything makes sense and everyone is up to speed. Let me go ahead and stop sharing there. Let's see if anyone is in the chat. What's up, Hexagon Wrestler? What's up, Name? BB. What up, Goldkey? Everyone's here. Well, cool. So I'm actually going to add to stream my other computer. Let's hope y'all can hear me because I'm going to be going over it on this other screen. So I'm not going to go over the whole contract today because basically the contract consists of the team contract, which handles the minting of team and the staking and all the stake management of team. But then it also has the part that deploys all the pools. We're not going to go over that. We're not going to go over, at least today, we're not going to go over the part that generates the that 369 maxi escrow. We're going to go over that later, and we're not going to go over the part that deploys the mystery box. And we will partially go over the part that deploys the contract that you actually claim your rewards from after you stake. So I guess what we'll do is we'll just kind of go over like a high level. Here, let me pull up here. Before we do that, let's go over the high level structure for how the staking works. And for that, I am going to bring back up my screen. We'll just keep building on this thing that we've already been making. New slide. Okay, so here, we'll do that. So pretty much the way that staking works is that it's all based on the base contract, which is like the calendar for all of the staking. So when it's in a base stake minting and redemption phase, those will be the even number stake periods. So in the team contract, there's a value called the stake period, and it just goes from 0 and just counts up all the way. So during stake period 0, the team stake period is accepting stakes for period 1. And so all the odd numbers of the periods in the team contract, all the odd numbers are active staking periods. So you need to be staked before the current period ticks over from 0 to 1 in order to lock in for that first period stake. and you have to hold that stake until at least period 2 happens. So you have to hold, like, if you're going to be staked for period 1, you need to be staked throughout the entire base stake period, because the base contract is what increments that value. And so even number periods in the team contract, those are not staking periods. And then the odd number ones are staking periods. And so basically what you do is you just your first step after, so once you have your team, this is like a basic like staking workflow. The first step that you're going to do is you're going to run the stake team function, and all you're going to do is give it an amount. So we're going to go over stake team, and then say during your stake, you may want to early end stake. Say the team price pumps, and you want to, take home some of your stake that you've already started. There's a function called, let me just get it right here, early end stake team. So early end stake team. So you give that an ID, which we'll get to in a minute, and an amount. And so early end stake ID, that you'll experience a penalty there. And then another, possible action after that is you might want to roll forward the rest of your stake. So what that is, it's called extend stake. And that basically pushes forward your existing stake into the next staking period. So we'll go over that. You don't give that an amount, you only give that an ID. So extend stake takes all of the stake and just extends the deadline. And then, so after that, the next thing that you can do is you can end complete stake. So end completed stake. And so you'll give that an ID and an amount. And so that's what you do after. So say it's the current period is 2 and you have staked for period of 1. Once it's period 2, you can run end completed stake and you can reclaim your team that you had staked during period 1. And so that's how you'll end your completed stake. Or you have the option to restake expired stake. And then in that case, you give it an ID, and then it just restakes your entire expired stake into the next one. So there's really 5 functions here where, one of them is to start staking. So that's what you do with, fresh liquid team. That's how you start staking. And then early end staking is when it's during an active stake, and you want to reclaim some of your team, you'll experience a penalty. Then extending the stake based on the ID, that is when it's during an active stake, no penalty, but you will experience a penalty if you early end stake a stake that you've extended. So maybe I won't add no penalty there because to not introduce confusion. And that, converts your existing stake to be ending in the, after the next staking period. So that's if you're currently in your staking period. All extending the stake does is just, adjust that stake record to, look at the next stake. So you just extend your stake, and that's basically because you have to lock in your stake for each year. You basically have to check in with the contract once a year in order to keep earning the stake rewards. So extending your stake is a way that any time during the year you can lock in for the next year. So you don't have to wait for that 7-day buffer period in between the stakes. You can just extend your stake at any time during the year. So that's what that one's for. That just like rolls forward your team stake into the next period. And then these ones, so this is after your stake has completed. So that's to end, and then you reclaim, you remint the amount. And whereas here, so here, that example is remint amount minus penalty. Um, and then when you restake your expired period, that one creates a new, it effectively creates a new stake as if it's from scratch, but it doesn't remint your team. So rather than reminting your team and then reburning it in order to stake, to restake this expired stake, all it does is it just takes those stake credits and then moves them forward into the next period by creating a new stake record. So so these are your five. These are the five functions that you'll be able to run on the staking contract to manage your stake. And it's all based on what the current period is relative to the stake that you enter when you're managing it. And so that's the general staking workflow. And then so these will just be the functions that you work through as you manage your stake, and you'll be able to read this like the information that helps you manage this stuff on the website. It'll be visible from the smart contract. It's all this stuff you could fully run from Etherscan, but we'll make some really good UI just to help people just have the right insights into how to use this stuff. But yeah, so that's pretty much what the way it works. And the basic rules that are enforced through this are that that to earn staking rewards for a period, you must have a record of staking during that period. So that's either you stake via the stake team function, or you extend your stake into that period. And then you must, to keep a stake alive, you must check in with the contract at least once per year. And then if you end your stake before it is done, you only remint the amount minus a 3.69% penalty. So yeah, so that's basically, like, those are the, if you know those three things, that pretty much takes you entirely there. And then these are the functions that you'll run on the contract that that you use just to manage your stake. So other than that, the stake record that I keep talking about, it's basically a piece of information that's stored in the smart contract that, so here we'll go stake record. Here, I'll actually do this. I'll explain it here. Let me pull up the other screen. So yeah, if you can see this, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. So whenever you run that new stake function, it creates something called a stake record. And what the stake record does is it just stores the information about the stake, and it's updated based on how you run those functions that I just described there. So some of the functions update some of the values, and then some of these values get crystallized over time, where if you're looking at a stake record from a prior period, you know that stake record hasn't been updated because certain parts of it can only be updated during a particular period. And so this lets you, like, looking at the stake record is how you as a user can get all the information you need about what you can do with your stake. So on the UI, like on the Maximus, like so on team.maximus.cash website, what you'll see is you'll see a list of your stake records, and then from the stake records, that's how you'll manage your stake. So that includes information like staker, so that's your address, initial period, so that's the first period in which you locked in your stake. Um, the amount, so that's the total amount that you've added to the stake, and then the amount unstaked is the total amount you've removed from your stake. So if you look at a stake record and the amount is greater than the amount unstaked, that means that you can withdraw whatever that difference is. You can unstake that remaining amount. And if you see a stake where amount equals amount unstaked, that means that you have already unstaked everything there is to stake there. And so if it's after that period and there's no more amount is equal to amount unstaked, then that's how you know that everything is done. As it says here, once a user unstakes from a period, the amount minus amount unstaked will be 0. There's a stake ID, and that's just that's basically the number that increments with each stake that you add. It is always going to be an odd number because it's always going to be the period that you started a stake in. And so that's just how the user identifies, which stake is which. There's a stake expiry period. That's the period that the stake is scheduled to serve through. It may be extended to the next staking period during the stake expiry period. If the current period is equal to your stake expiry period, that's when you can roll it forward. And that stake expiry period gets updated to be whatever the next staking period is. Then there's stake team per period, and that is a record of the number of team that successfully served each staking period during the stake. This number crystallizes as each staking period ends and is used to claim rewards. Yep. So that just keeps a running tally of how many team you have staked during each period. And then as the periods tick over, it finalizes. So after period 3 is done, no more unstaking can happen from period 3. And so the amount that you stake during that period is finalized. And then the contract, when you're claiming your rewards, looks at that value and then tells you how many redemption credits you get based on how many staked team per period you can prove that you served. And you prove with your stake record. Then there's this like a mapping that shows did claim stake rewards. That's something that helps the contract give you your stake rewards that you can claim. And then this Boolean is initiated, and that's just what helps when you create a record. It just helps it know that like a record for that ID has been created. So then there's a handful of these. So that's the stake record. So that gets created every time you create a new stake, and then it's updated every time you manage the stake. So it's pretty simple how that works. There's also some total numbers that we keep track of. One is the global amount staked. So that's the total number of team that are staked at any given time. So say the total team supply is 100 million, and then a million team gets staked. If you look at the total supply function on the team contract, since staked team is burnt, you'll see that the total team supply is 99 million, and then the global amount staked is 1 million. So the total team supply at any time is the total supply that you can read from the contract plus this global amount staked. It's kind of like in Hex when you look at the total supply, you have the total amount of liquid hex, and then there's another supply value that includes the staked hex. That's exactly what it is. So the sum of those two numbers is the total team supply. And so that total that percent of team stake that we talked about in the last video where we crunched through the numbers, that comes from the global amount staked divided by total supply plus global amount staked. So that's like how we know what the percentage is of the total. And then you get to, and then that's how it, you know what that payout's going to be per period per team staked. So other than that, there's the user amount staked. So that's like for each user, how many total they have staked. So your total team balance is going to be, when you read the balance of function in the contract, plus user amount staked, because balance of only reads your liquid team. User amount staked is how you read your stake team. So your total team is going to be user amount staked plus the balance of that you can read just like any normal ERC20. And then there's a record of global staked team per period. So this is a record of the number of team that are successfully staked for each stake period. This value crystallizes in each period as the periods end. So that's how we know what percent you consist of the total number of teams staked is by this global stake team per period. So when you stake, you increase that number. And when you end stake, in your early end stake, you decrease that number. This number is not updated when when the stake is ended after it's been served fully. This is purely to keep track of the number of team that is staked throughout an entire period. So this is a pretty important number here. And what this means here, mapping uint to uint 256 means that you can search for this number by looking for the period where this uint is the period. You just search for global stake team per period, and then you enter in period. So for instance, I already have a version of this deployed. So let's take a look at this. So let's find global stake team per period. So if you're looking at this directly, like on Etherscan, you could run this function. And so right here in my little sample testing that I was doing before this, we see that in period 3, this number of team was staked. And then in period 5, it's a smaller number. Period 7, an even smaller number. Let's look at period 9. So period 9 hasn't happened yet on mine. It's right now in my little test environment. It's currently period 6. So that means nothing's been added to that yet, because you can only add to a staked period if it's 1 or 2 periods before that period. So you cannot add this period 9 because it's only period 6. You can start adding to period 9 once it's period 7. Yeah, so that's basically how that's works there. Let's go back to team. Why is that doing this? Okay, this is a problem. Let's reload. Let's see if that worked. Okay, let's. Okay, we're back. Okay, so let's go back to the staking section. Okay, so that's the global stake team per period. Public num stakes. I don't even know if I'm actually using that number. We'll check on that, but that's just to keep track of how many total stakes have been entered. Num user stakes tells you how many stakes you have created, and that'll just be to help you manage it. And then stake record is, or this right here where it says mapping address mapping uint stake record, and it's a mapping called stakes. So this is where you can find all the stakes of all the users. And so the way to find your stakes is you search stakes. So here, let's just pull this back up. Ah, shit. Okay, I had to refresh this, so let me pull it back in this contract. Actually, I can copy it from right here. We're going to get this pulled back up. I'll load the contract. Yeah. Okay. Team. Yeah. Okay. So when we look at that stake value here, so for instance, on my like test site here, or on my test account, so we're going to pull up all the stakes that I've created. So that's so you like the contract can just be searched by searching the address, and then in period one, let's see. That's not right. Here, you know what we'll do? We'll just completely read here. We're going to just deploy from scratch. So here, we'll go back to what that stakes is. So yeah, so here, let me just deploy this, and then we'll keep going through this. So we're going to deploy team. Oh, duh, that's why. Needed to be connected there. So here, then this should actually work. I don't need to redeploy it. So if this says it's 6, we're right. You get current period 1. What? Is that right? Okay, here's I'm just gonna do this. We're just gonna hit deploy. We're gonna do brand new. Something's wrong there. David Feeder says my favorite code review time. Okay, so let's see. I just deployed this one. So let's just go through the motions here. So in my deployment script, I actually have it so that just for testing, I have a little test faucet, and then I run stake team for this amount, and then I do another stake team for this amount. Then I increment the test period, meaning I like start the stake pretty much, and then I start again. So what we should expect to see is that on my current user account, so let me just copy my address here. We should expect to see that when we read my stake record for stake period 1, we should see that the total staked amount is going to be something like 1002222. So let's come down here. We'll look at that, and then in period 1, yep. So when we looked up the staker record from that stakes field, we get back to it. Yep. So we found this stake record by searching the address and the period. So address period on the stakes field, and we saw that we have done 1,000 or 100222222 team staked. So and the way that worked is when we ran that stake team function, which is the same if we had just gone in here. So so this you would be doing on the dashboard. There'd be a field where you can type in the amount you're going to stake, and then you just run it there. But when you're running that stake team function, First, what it does is it checks the balance to make sure that you have as much liquid team as you're trying to stake. Then it runs this new stake function, which that updates the stake record. So that new stake is really like a stake record management function. And then it burns the amount that you staked. And then it updates these global fields. That global amount staked we talked about, it updates it. And then the user amount staked for the user that broadcasts the transaction, it also updates that there. So what we do here in this new stake amount function, first what it does is it gets the next staking period. So that's because like you can always, like when you look at that stake team function, it only takes in an amount. And that's because when you're staking team, the only option you have to what period you can stake in is whichever is the next period, the next staking period that hasn't started yet. So if it's in period 1, then that means if period 1's already started, you can't add to period 1. So you can only add to period 3. And say it's period 2, period 1, the staking period 1 is over, because remember, the staking periods are always the odd numbers. When period 1 is over and it's period 2, the next staking period is period 3. And so during either period 1 or period 2, if you were to run new stake, what you'd see here is that it adds it to the next staking period. And that's what we're doing right here. So we're just getting whatever the next staking period is. And that function, it looks at what the current period is and then figures out if it's a staking period or not. So, and then it tells you what the number is of the next staking period. So then what it does is it pulls in the stake. So it looks for a stake record from message.sender, that's you, that's your address, and then whatever the next staking period is. So it looks to see if you've made a staking record in that period, in that next staking period. And then it runs if stake.initiated is false. So if that stake has not been initiated yet, it tallies up the number of stakes that you, as a user, have by adding 1 to that number. It gives a stake ID. So now it matches it gives your stake an ID, which consists of that staking period. And then it sets this initiated to true. So this doesn't run again next time you run new stake during that same period. So that's how it initiates the stake. And then it populates that information in that stake record with the information from your request. So here it adds your address, message.sender, sets the staker to be you, sets the amount to where it adds the current amount to the amount you've already staked. So that means that you can run this more than once before that next staking period starts, and you just add to your existing stake. So at any time before, so say you're waiting for period 3 to start, at any time during periods 1 and 2, you can be adding to your stake, and you're just building up your stake for period 3, and it's all under one stake. So that just makes it easier to manage. And then it sets the initial period of your stake. So this value doesn't change, and that's a number that so that's just to designate what the starting period is of your stake. And then this one stake expiry period. So that is the period after which your stake has expired. Maybe it should have a better name. Maybe I will update the name to something more like, stake target period or something to indicate that like that's the period that's the deadline for your stake to last. Like that's when I gave it the expiry period because that's after that period is when you expire. So your stake is active until that expiry period. But that's basically telling you when that stake ends. So if it's currently period 2 and you stake for period 3, that value of stake expiry period is going to be period 3. But then say it's during period 3 and you roll forward your stake, then that value gets updated to be period 5. And so that pretty much just like tells your stake record when your stake is scheduled to end. And so that, but I think maybe I'll come up with a better name than stake expiry period, but that's basically what it's doing. And then after you do that, it updates those rolling totals that tell it how much total team was staked during that period, and then how much team you staked during that period. So you're basically just updating the running total, that just tells that just helps the system know how many rewards you're eligible to claim. So yeah, that's the new stake function. So right here, and just under, what is that, like 25 lines of code, many of which are just comments. Um, that's the staking. So basically, you know you update your stake record, you burn the amount of team, and then you update the global records of the global amount staked and the user amount staked. So it's very simple. So the team state, like the actual mechanisms of team staking, are very, very simple. It's all, where when you stake your team, you're just either creating a new stake or adding to an existing one, and then you're just updating the values as you go. And so now, if you just don't do anything, and then as it ages into the next staking period, then that information you put into this new stake function, that just crystallizes, and then it's on to the next one. So if the period continues on, then next time you run this, it'll be under a new period, but the same thing just gets repeated in that next sequence. So that's how the stakes, that's how you'll create the stakes. And then as you create your stakes, I mean the DApp front end will look at your address and look at all your stakes, and then that's how it'll tell you what actions you can take. Because look at this. So right now, just for example here, we have that amount staked, and then it is currently, let's see what period it is. So right now, as you can see here, it's currently period 1, and us as a sample user, we have 100222222 team staked during period 1, and it is during period 1. So let's do this. We're going to go through the early end stake example next. So it's currently period 1, and so say the team price is pumping, and we want to end our stake or end part of it. You don't have to end all of it. You can end any increment you want. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the early end stake function. So let's go ahead and run that, and then we'll go through the code. So we find the early end stake function. So we'll paste in the amount, and we know that stake ID is 1. You see right there, the one that we just searched. So we're finding in the stake ID, we're doing early. Where did we find that? Stake ID is 1, and then that amount is just that like leftover amount. And here we're going to early end stake this, and let's see what happens. All right, so we early end staked. It looked like it went through. Now let's look on the block explorer and see what happened here. Okay, so we see the detail. It's confirmed. Thank you, David. I think you're the one confirming these on your validator. So look at that. So we entered 2222, but as we see here, it only reminted us 214. Why is that? That's because that 3.69% early end stake penalty. So because we ran early end stake for a stake ID where that stake, the stake expiry period was 1, but the current period was also 1, meaning that stake had not ended yet. Because we did that, we didn't get all back 222,222. We only got back 214,023. So if we look at 222,222 minus 214,023, we see that is 8199. If we divide 8199 by 2222, you see that we get that 3.69% penalty. So how does that work? So when you run early end stake team, that's this public function, and you give it that stake ID and the amount. First, what it does is it updates your stake record. So it goes in here, gets the current period, gets the next period, pulls in that stake from the stake ID. Then it checks to make sure that you've started a stake. Then it checks to see if the stake expiry period is greater than or equal to the current period. So if that stake expiry period from your from your stake record is greater than or equal to the current period, that means that your stake has not been successfully served. So it checks that to make sure that you're actually early end staking. And then it checks to see if the amount that you've staked minus the amount that you've unstaked is greater than the amount that you requested to end stake. And that's just to make sure that you can't end stake more than you've staked, to prevent there from being an inflation bug. Because say you could just end stake and remint the coins. What if you could end stake more than you have staked? That wouldn't make sense. So that's what this line does, is it makes sure that the amount that is eligible to be end staked is greater than the amount or equal to the amount that they're requesting. That's what it says here. You're requesting more than is actively staked in the stake. And so if all those things are verified, then it updates the stake amount unstaked to, it adds the amount that you're unstaking. So now the total amount unstaked is updated to the new total. And then now what it's doing is it's updating those running total values of the amount of team you have staked per period and the amount that is globally staked per period. So global stake team per period of the next staking period, because what this does here is it checks to see if the stake team per period for the next period is if you've staked in that period, meaning have you extended your stake into that next period, and then it removes the team that you've staked from that period from your records running total. And that's just to prevent you from being able to claim rewards against the team that you've early end staked. So it unstakes from the next staking period, and then also from the current staking period, it removes the amount that you've staked. And so that's just how it keeps track of how much was actually successfully staked during the whole period, because these values, again, they crystallize as the stake periods tick over. And so as the team is removed from these records, then that's because this was early end staked, and so that team should not show up in these totals that act like the final final confirmed value of how much was staked during that period. So that's all it's doing there. It's pretty simple. So once it updates the stake record, it calculates the penalty. And so it does some math. Just because Solidity, it doesn't have decimal points, in order to do division or to like multiply by a percent, you pretty much have to scale up by some number, do the division, and then scale back down. So here what I'm doing is to calculate the current potential penalty scaled, I'm doing 369 times 10 to the fourth. And that amount is, it turns into 369,0000. And that's because the number that I scale by is usually 10 to the 8, as you can see here on this one where I get penalty, where I take the scaled value and then I unscale it. So I usually go by that 10 to the 8. No reason, but that's just like a good big number to use. And so by doing that by multiplying 369 by 10 to the 4, that's the same thing as doing 0.0369 times 10 to the 8. So that's just because there's no decimals. That's just like a little math trick. But, so that number 369 times 10 to the 4 times the amount is, because the penalty only applies to the amount that you're early end staking, and you don't have to early end stake all of it. You can choose how much of your stake you want to early end. That's what gives that scaled penalty, and then you unscale it before you get the final penalty. So that's just how the 3.69% penalty is calculated. And then so we get that penalty, and then we update the total like global tallies, for the globe and for you. And then what we remint back to that user's wallet is the amount that they requested minus the penalty. And so that's what we saw here, where we requested 2222 and we only got 214. That, what was that, like 8,199 difference or whatever it was. That number is the penalty. So it didn't get reminted there. So that's how the early end stake penalty works. And so now when we look at our value, so last time we refreshed this, that was before, but now that we've unstaked 2222, we should see that be reflected here. So let's take a look. Yep. And notice how the amount didn't change. That's because the amount only goes up. Both of these numbers only go up. And then the total amount currently staked is amount minus amount unstaked. Maybe I should add that to the stake record, just like a third value there. I don't necessarily need to, because you can always just calculate that on demand, and that'll save, just be a little more efficient for the contract. But that might be a helpful number just to have right there. So that's what how that amount unstaked worked. And then so that's like how the early end staking works. Now let's try. We're still in the current period. So it's still period 1. And during period 1, we have staked. So we still have, what is that, like 1 billion team staked. So now let's try, we'll skip to the stake extension part. So say we want to roll forward into that next staking period. So what we're going to do is you're going to run this extend stake function, which is a public interface to just calling this private function, stake extension. So what stake extension does, it gets the current period, it gets the next staking period, it retrieves the stake that you have requested, and it checks to see if the stake expiry equals the current period, because you can only roll forward during that stake. It checks to make sure that the current period is the stake expiry period. And then all it does is it just sets that stake expiry period to be equal to the next staking period. So it updates that value that we keep looking at, the stake expiry period. It updates that to be, that whatever the next staking period is. And then it calculates the amount, the actively staked amount. So the stake dot amount minus stake dot amount unstaked. And then it rolls forward all of it into that next staking period. And all it does to roll it forward is it just adds it to those running totals that are tracked in the stake. So global staked team per period for next staking period is incremented by the active amount that we just calculated. And then the staked team per period for yourself within your stake for that next staking period is also incremented by that active amount. By updating the stake expiry period for your stake and then rolling forward those stake credits into that next period, that is all it needs to do to just move you forward into that next period. So then it's just like as if your existing stake is, just lasts until the end of period 3. So let's do that. Let's do that example right now. So as of now, it's still period 1. We have a stake that expires after period 1. And so we're going to roll it forward. So that means we need to find this extend stake function. And we're going to do that for our stake ID that was stake ID 1. We're going to roll that whole stake forward. So we just hit transact. Okay. Looks like it went through. So now what we see is if we click this again, we see all that changed was that stake expiry period 3 was updated to, or stake expiry period was updated to be 3. And then now if we look at get address period and total, so that's a function I'll show you in a little bit where you can look up how much is staked in each period for each stake. So period 1 from stake ID 1, we see that 100,000 or whatever 1 billion was successfully staked, or as of now is successfully staked, and that gets finalized once the period increases. But then also for period 3, because we rolled forward that amount, it got added to that period. And so now if we were to run early end stake team again, let's do a number that we can easily identify. So we're just going to do 1, 1, 1, 1. Actually, we're going to do 100,000. We early end stake team again. Once that goes through, we see that we have amount unstaked is increased by that amount. And then when we look at these period totals again, you see that number goes down. That's because we've early end staked during that period. So now when we look at period 3, you see that number went down. And that's because the current period is period 1. Our stake was set to expire in period 3. And so because we early end staked any of it, it was removed from both period 1 and period 3. And that's because period 3 is just a copy of period 1. So early end staking, after you've rolled forward, it's effectively as if you had early end staked before you'd roll forward. So and the penalty still applies. So that's like the whole rolling forward of the stake and early end staking sequence. So now let's go over the what to do with a completed stake. So we're looking at current period is period 1, and then now what we're going to do is we're going to increment the period. Just this is for test purposes. So I can increment this period. Once that goes through, we should see this update to get current period is period 2. Yep. Okay. So now it's period 2. And so that means that our stake from period 1 is successful, and the stake from period 3 is still pending because it hasn't been completed yet, because it's period 2. So let's look at so our stake in period 1 is that 999 number, and then we look at period 3, it's that 999 number again. Let's early end stake again and see what happens. So we early end staked there. We should see that number go up to be 42222. Yep. But now let's look at the total amounts. So we look at period 1, that number stays the same. That's because period 1 was already complete, and this value that get address period end total is pulling, it becomes finalized once that period ends. And since now it's period 2, the period 1 end total is finalized. But if we look at period 3, because we had just run early end stake, we see it go down 998. We see that number decrease. So that means that the early end stake is working, that after that successful period is ended, you still get credit for that, but you just experience a penalty on the next batch. And so that's basically how that works. So now let's take a look at ending. Okay, so actually we can't end complete stake on the stake period 1 because let's just try it. So what it does is it updates the stake record. So first it gets the current period, pulls in the stake that you requested, and then it checks to see that the stake expiry period is less than current period, meaning that stake is successfully ended. And so if we try to end a completed stake on a stake that we've already rolled forward. So stake ID is 1, and let's just say the amount that we're going to try to do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This should throw an error because the stake expiry period is less than, or it is less than the current period. So see that error? It wouldn't even let it run. So by running that roll forward, your current stake turns into, it changes that deadline that it runs until. And so that's why you can't end a completed stake, because that stake is not over. But let's do this now. I guess before, I should have done that before. Shoot. Okay. Oh well. Okay. So now let's just increment the period. And we're going to increment. Let's see what the period is now. So now it's period 3, and we're going to increment one more time. Okay. So now that we've incremented that period, it should be period 4. Now our original stake is eligible to end or roll forward. And so, because its expiry period is 3. So now let's come in here. Here's what we're going to do. Say we want to end stake part of it and then roll forward and just restake this, whatever that amount is. So let's see how much we have. We have this number minus this number. So 800,000. So let's do, we're going to do 800,000. We're going to end stake 800, 1, 2, 3. So we're going to end stake that amount, and we experience no penalty there. So let's pull up the transaction hash. Okay, it'll show the minting once that gets confirmed. Okay, while we wait, let's see. Any questions? Thank you a lot, Luisito. Really want to know what those final rules are. In it for the tech. What's up, GRC? It's a good question. He says the lower the hex price, the more likely the perpetuals will meet their bonus, right? So that's true if people are measuring in dollars and if a lot of the participation is from new onboarding, because 150 million at a low price is, like say the hex price is 1 cent, that means that the 150 million is only just like $1.5 million. So, but that's at that low price. But if people already have the hex, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so you saw there how we ran the end completed stake and it got all 800,000, and that's just because it never experienced that penalty because it was successfully served. And so now we look back at this number, that amount has gone up. So now we have, what would that be? 99 million units still in that stake. Now we're going to, rather than ending a completed stake, we are going to restake an expired stake. And so because the staking period, that expiry date is less than the current period, that means that if you want to restake it without taking possession of your team again, you just run the restake expired stake function. So all that does is it looks at the current period, it gets the stake ID that you passed it, it calculates to make sure that the stake expiry period is less than the current period, meaning that your stake is expired. And then it checks to make sure that the stake amount that you've unstaked is less than the stake amount, meaning that you still have stuff left to stake. And that's what we calculate here, which is that active amount, which is the stake amount minus the amount unstaked. So when we look at ours, it'll be something like 99 million, I think. And then it sets the stake amount unstaked equals stake amount. So that pretty much closes out, because like the whole premise is that stake amount minus amount unstaked is the amount remaining. And so if amount unstaked is equal to stake amount, that means that like this stake is fully closed out and rolled into the next period. And then it runs new stake from active amount. So it runs the same code that the stake team function runs, but you see that step where it says new stake under stake team? It runs that same thing right here, but it doesn't do the the burning and the global update, because that's already been done, right? Like when you stake your team, it does the burn already, so those coins are already burnt, and it already updates these values. So all like those steps are already done. So restake expired stake just does the new stake part. So it basically just creates a new stake record from scratch, but it doesn't do the burning and the global value updates. So that's how that works. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to, so here, we haven't done it yet. So when we look at the stake, we see amount is the 100222, and then the amount unstaked is 12222. So now if we go to restake expired, and we want to restake our first stake. Okay, so now that we've restaked that expired stake, when we look at this one, see that number now matches. So that stake is fully expired. And then now when we look at, because the current period is 4, that means that we rolled forward a new stake into period 5. So that number, that like 99 million, we should see appear here in stake 5. Let's see if it worked. Yep. So 99 million team appear right there. And that lets you know that, now you have staked for that next period, and it just kind of goes from there. So that's kind of the full sequence that we have with these stakes, and it really just comes back down to those 5 functions that we talked about: stake team, early end stake team, extend stake, end completed stake, and restake expired stake. So those are the functions that run the staking. And so from the information that those functions update, that's how the stake reward distribution system works to confirm that you successfully served a stake. And that's what lets you withdraw your portion of the claim rewards per each token that was measured during that period. So that's the staking. That's what I've been working like. So from the version of this that we tested on testnet a couple weeks ago, I basically wrote the whole thing. Like the old one it was very complicated, very difficult. Like you would have had to really know what you're doing to like understand what what periods are staked in and what to do with a penalty. It was all kind of blended into one. But the way that I structure this now, one, it's a lot easier from a user's perspective on what's going on. The code went from like 300 lines of code to right now the staking happens all within like, I don't know, like 150 lines of code. So it became much more understandable from a user's perspective. It made the creation of the UI for the staking so much easier because now it's like basically we just show the user a list of all their stakes from their stake records, and then based on what period it is now versus what period is their expiry date, that's how we know what options to give that user. And then everything is just like so simple that it just works. So um, drastic improvements were made as a result of that first staking period. So thank you for the handful of people that helped with that. Because that helped drastically. Like this staking sequence is so much better this way. So, so pretty much the next steps with this are to just work on the front end part. So I'm done with the contract for now. We still need to finalize the testing. So my next steps are going to be to take this contract and deploy it, and then stand up like a UI for utilizing the staking. And we're going to run another test sequence on a base stake that's like a 1 day on, 1 day off type of stake. So that's what we're going to be doing next. Is we're going to be just getting this ready to do some testing, and then once we get like a sanity check that everything just works and we have no issues with the front end and the contract, then we're going to finalize the contract and send it off to audit. And last time the audit only took like about a week. This one may be a little longer because it's a little bit more expansive. So if we get a successful testing done in the next, say, 8 days, and then audit takes another week or two after that, that puts us pretty close to being ready to launch. And basically once this thing gets audited and we're confident that it's going to work, then it's go time. So the staking sequence was the last part that I had to go through. And then and yeah, so once we finalize the contract, I'll probably do another like full code review again. But now I just wanted to do this video just to show you guys just how the staking works, how to think about the staking and the periods, and just kind of get you ready for some additional information that we're going to be publishing about the staking rules, different scenarios, and hopefully we made this in a way that's really easy to navigate and makes for a really effective staking experience. Cool. So let's go through the chat, see if anyone said anything. Thank you for providing this transparency and deep dive into Maxi and team staking. Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is helpful for me to just go through this. I've literally been staring at this nonstop for weeks now. So it's always helpful for me to just kind of like put words to it and, share with you all. And, it's kind of what, if you're going to build trustless finance, it needs to be fully transparent. And so we're hoping to capture that through doing these. Vets in crypto, what's up, dude? Thank you. Schilt, what's good, brother? Put in plenty of event. Oh yeah, you're right. So we didn't even talk about that. I need to rewrite all the event, because right now I have like mint, stake, and end stake, and those were based on the old staking system. But I need to update that. Yeah, you're right. That'll be like the last step, is to put that in. And that's something that I wish I did on Maxi, but I didn't. And that's and doing the events just pretty much lets you make better like data visualization and get better insight into what's going on inside the contract. So that if we have these emits, then we can build like those GraphQL subgraphs that let you like query the events and see, total number of stakers, percent staked, all that stuff. So yes, you're right. We absolutely will put in a lot of events. Launch after dead cat bounce. I'm not looking at the charts on when to launch. Like this will be launched as soon as it's ready, not a minute later. There'll be no timing. What's up, Hexagons? We already talked about that. Can't focus on the festival until I get some liquidity to play with. Some Hexagon is busy. We all are. So to the launch, we can't really get anything rolling for our community. Yep. All right, just scream top as long as the bottom be 11K or more. He's timing the market, waiting on devs, not sweating on devs. And it's like, nah, I don't know. I don't think so. It's like, what is that extra percent difference going to make? Like, not much. If something happened to maxing the pretzels and team like Tornado Cash, what would happen to the smart contract? I know it's a broad question. Fill in your answer regarding sanctions, please. So, if a government wanted to try suppressing addresses that interact with it, kind of how they're suppressing addresses that interact with Tornado, then they always can. And they're going to do it through the avenues that they have, which are mainly have to do with fiat on-ramps. Because that's the only area that they really can sanction and actually take meaningful action on. So perhaps, what if they decide that all the maxi people are, should be killed, and until they figure out how to kill all the maxi people, they're just like, all right, we're gonna, any address that interacted with the team contract, if that address sends funds to Coinbase, we're gonna hold a gun to Coinbase's head and say, if those people send you a transaction, you can't let them withdraw. So they could do that. So wherever they have the interface is where they're going to apply pressure. But there's nothing they can do to actually shut down our contract unless they like infiltrate the blockchain operators, like with the validators or like mining apparatus. Maybe that's how they can figure out how to suppress it. But they're gonna, if they do suppression, it's going to be on the fiat on ramp side of it, because that's the part that they actually have leverage on. So yeah, that's probably what would happen. But they could kill you for other reasons. They could just pull you over and say you're speeding, and then the end result of that is you're toast. That there are many ways that they can come and get you, not just related to suppressing transactions. This is awesome. I'm learning. Thanks for going over the code. Yep, happy to do it. Are stake rewards a security? No, it's the stake rewards are Hex, and Hex is a commodity, and so the stake rewards are a commodity. Has the new code been reviewed by Pulse Police? No, probably not, because I haven't really published this anywhere. It's in a private GitHub right now. So no, this has not been reviewed by anybody. Simplicity is always best from the end user standpoint. Good job, bro. Yep, thank you. I'm glad I was able to, even though the other one, it might have worked. There were some things that I could have fixed and could have made it work. It was just so confusing, and it wouldn't be something where like, okay, I have a stake record and now I manage that stake. Like that's how this works, and so this should just make for a really simple staking experience. Did you copy any code from the Hex smart contract? No, nothing really applies there. I guess in the sense that like using the default like ERC20 libraries, yeah, but as far as like the Hex staking, I guess we use the similar staking technique as Hex, where the staked coins are burnt and then they're reminted into existence. But that's not unique only to Hex. Like other things do that too, and that's a good procedure that allows the staking to not be some type of custody solution. And helps reduce the attack surface. So no, none of the code has been copied from Hex. So we have more time to save up, especially with Hedger and ICOS launching, money flying at the ass. Damn, look forward to team. Yeah, I mean, tough decisions coming up, and that's honestly a good thing. Like I'm fine with there being many tough decisions on where to allocate your funds, because every maxi that is not minted into team is just maxi that can be FOMO'd in later, and that could be exciting. If audit finds something wrong, we'll take another week or so for a second. Yeah, so usually what happens if like the audit finds something wrong, the whole thing doesn't need to be re-audited. Usually just the part that you fixed, you showed them your solution. Usually they present you a solution, and then you integrate it, and then they go and check it. So usually, like last time during the audit, they didn't come back with anything critical, but the things that they recommended I fix, the fixing took like a day, and then their review on it to like approve it only took a day. So it wouldn't take, unless it's like a big expansive change, it wouldn't take another week or so. It should only take less time. Has any high profile hexagon review the code? No, I mean no one's really reviewed it yet. It's been on a private GitHub, and so me, if you consider me a high profile hexagon. Can any coder now copy this smart contract? Why aren't you worried about someone ripping off the code? Just curious. Yeah, so this code is not licensed for use. There was an instance where someone did rip off the Maxi contract, and by now, but with that Okta thing, and I only realized that it was like a full copy pretty late into that, so I wasn't able to do a cease and desist and actually try to stop it. Ended up being like only like a tiny amount of money was actually pulled in that. The largest minter pulled minutes before the stake started. So I don't know if they introduced something crazy in that code, but someone kind of ripped it off. And had I seen it earlier, I probably would have taken legal action, but I just saw it a little bit too late to kind of do anything about it before the stake ended. And then from there, it's like, okay, what am I going to do? And it was a tiny amount. But there, if this code is ripped off and used, then that person would be infringing on the copyright, and yeah, so that probably wouldn't be the best thing for them. So I mean, I haven't published the code in full. Also, I mean, if someone's ripped it off and launched it, it's like, okay, are like all the people that like are going to be minting team, like are they just going to run? Like, I don't think people would just be rushing into that. I think a lot of this is like that Maximus is like created by us, and I don't think people would necessarily want to use like a ripped off version. Because if that person's going to rip it off and try to deceive you into thinking it's a real thing, then what type of gain are they trying to have from it at your expense? So not too worried about that. Do you believe in a higher power or believe in God? So I believe that we all are the higher power. Like we all are God. And I err on the side of like concepts like both like infinity is kind of like what God means, like this like overarching all being concept. As far as like a personified God, that just kind of seems kind of wacky to me. But as far as like the use of a personified God in allowing people to experience that higher power, a lot of people aren't going to be able to make the connection that like within mathematics, you can experience higher power and understand all things. Like most people aren't going to capture that. And so having like a personified God that they can, relate to that higher power through, that's like a powerful channel, which has been proven through history to be effective in onboarding and retaining people to be connecting with the higher power. So I absolutely believe in higher power, but I don't think it's like a thing or a person or an event. I think it's we are the higher power, all the energy amongst us and everything else in the universe and across all dimensions of the universe. I think that we all together are a higher power that is simultaneously infinitely huge and then infinitely small. And that's kind of what I believe. You deserve a Nobel Peace Prize after Richards get hit. That'd be awesome. That'd be pretty cool. Please nominate me, Constantine. Which project in the RH community do you wish you had more time to learn about? Probably Maximus stuff, for sure. I think I can safely speak for this chat. Give your wife a special thanks from us Hexicans to her for all the time you devote to the Hex community. Yeah, I mean, she's always been supportive of everything that I've got going on, and I think she, as much as she wishes, I mean, even though I spend so much time with her, like I try to give her such rewarding, good, positive experiences. There are things I do every single day, no matter how I'm feeling, just to like have that time, for us to connect. So like, she never feels like the stuff I do for Hex is at her expense at all. Like I definitely take the time to maintain a relationship, because it's very important. Because like, what would be the point of all this hex stuff if like it wasn't for like the people that we can share it with? And so so she definitely appreciates it. And also it's like, kind of unstoppable. Like, what, like really, what would anyone do to like try to stop me? Like truly. So, but I'm very thankful that I have an awesome wife that understands the higher purpose that we're all pursuing through this. Icosa hedron staking could help pump Maxi and team. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, if those things cause the hedron price to go up, and if that hedron price increase is reflected in the Maxi price, then boom, Maxi values goes up. Since team gets the hedron from the stake pools, boom, any hedron price appreciation goes to them. So yeah, everything that they're doing it with hedron is absolutely benefiting Maxi and team. So actually, here I want to let's go through one last thing just to kind of help you think about the staking periods. Let's just do like a new blank one. No, staking periods. So the period, like, so the like system period. So the system period keeps track of how many base stakes have happened and what phase of the base stake it currently is. So if you imagine the base stake being, so this is like the minting redemption phase. Let's get some brighter colors on that. Yeah. So if this is like the minting and redemption phase of base, and then let's do this one a little lighter. And then this is like when the base stake is happening. And then it repeats. Oh, not even sharing my screen. Sorry, guys. So if this blue section is the like on the base stake, it's the minting and redemption phase. So let's do let's get so for base, the minting redemption phase. Then this right here, then this phase is a base staking phase. And so in order to be a successfully staked team, you have to have started your stake before the base staking phase and served through the base staking phase. And so if this is phase, so that's going to be phase 0. This is phase 1. This one is phase 2. This is phase 3. So if you can see that. So that's the base period is the team period. And so whenever you're starting a stake, you want to serve for a whole period. So for instance, you might, if you were to start your stake here, let's get some, so we started it there. Let's thicken these lines. If you started it and then ended here, you would experience an early end stake penalty. If you started it and then staked up and through here and then ended it, then you can end just fine. So these numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, like all the stake periods are going to be 1 and 3 and odd numbers. All the the redemption periods are going to be even. And so that's just how you have to think of those numbers. Like if you're reading that get current period, the staking period are going to be, if it's 1 or 3 or any odd number, it's going to be an active stake, and then you can always stake into the next staking period. So just wanted to make that clear. Contract's looking great. Thank you. Anytime after launch, couple weeks. Great stream. Thank you. That was, of course, the question I'm getting the most. What was his question? Soon 6 charts to look at. What did we say? I mean, there's going to be more than those 6 because you have Maxi Base, Maxi Trio, Maxi Lucky, Maxi Desi, Maxi Team. Then you have Base Trio, Base Lucky, Base Desi, Base Team. Then you have Trio Lucky, Trio Desi, Trio Team, Trio Maxi. So you kind of have all those combinations. So they're actually going to be way more than 6. Would they be like 6 factorial or something? If someone buys Team after the staking phase, do they need to hold it liquid until the next coming annual staking phase? No, so you can lock it in whenever, but the stake period that it is locked in for is always the next one. So here let's take a look at this. So here, let's copy this and then blow it up on a new slide. So let's post this question. So here, let's. Okay, so if someone buys Team after the staking phase, do they need to hold it liquid until the next coming annual staking phase? So let's just treat it like this. So say someone bought Team during this phase. So here they bought Team. Let's remove this here. So this person bought Team. So they bought Team right there, and then they started their stake. So let's just so they bought the Team and then they started the stake. Their stake record would say, so their initial period would be 3. Their stake expiry period would be 3. Even though they started it during period 1, whenever you run that new stake function, it always looks for the next stake period that hasn't started yet, and that's when it locks your stake in. And so no matter where you bought your Team during this time, So say you bought the team way over here. No matter when you bought it and then staked during period 1, you're locked in to period 3. And so you have to wait until after period 3 ends to successfully stake for period 3, even if it's one day after. Like you could be staked and not earning anything for like a whole year if you bought and staked right when it started. So probably the best thing to do would be to, if you were to buy team during a staking phase and you're just waiting, just hold it liquid until later on, until you're certain that you're going to want to stake for that period. Because what if price is pumping and you don't even want to stake anymore? If you were to have already staked, then if you wanted to early end stake, you would have to pay that penalty. And the penalty is just, it's not burnt. Or the penalty is effectively just permanently burnt, meaning that everyone else, it's like it's just absorbed by everyone else equally. So if you're certain that you want to stake for the next period, that's the only time you should actually stake. So if you bought early on, unless you're certain that you want to be staked and earning in period 3 for the whole duration, you should just not stake. Only once you're fully certain, that's when you stake. And you have the whole year to do it. Up until when the next base stake starts, that's when you can lock in. So you don't need to, so like, it doesn't matter when you lock in, as long as you're before this, right here, that deadline. Good question. 36 charts. Yeah. It's literally going to be crazy. Spoken to Dylan or nope, haven't. All right. Here I'm going to start eating. Unless anyone has any more questions. That was a good, successful session. We went over the contract, walked you through it, gave some details. So our next step really is to produce some more digestible content about the staking rules and how the staking works. We're going to get the UIs ready so we can start testing. And then once we proved ourselves that everything is good to go, then we're going to move forward with audit and get this thing launched. So let's see. After period 1, why not period 2? Why wait to period 3? No. So like period 2 isn't a staking period. The only staking periods are period 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. And so you could start you could start your period 3 stake in either period 1 or period 2. But it doesn't matter when it's basically like everything before this line and everything after the line is pretty much how it works, because it's always looking for the next staking period to start the stake under. Yep. All right, guys. So having more. Let's finish out this and close it out. So follow me, twitter.com, Tantonomini. Follow twitter.com/MaximusDAO. Subscribe on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. I'm over 1,000 followers on YouTube now. Let's keep that number cranking. He says, great stream. Dolly Brand says, thanks for the stream. The perpetual, do they automatically restart or do you do it manually? So they don't automatically restart. Someone has to do it. So when those stakes end, it's up to anyone to just go on Etherscan and click start stake. That's pretty much how that works. All right. Let's play this and I'm out. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon. Hey, hey. All right, guys, I'm out. Thank y'all so much.